Welcome to video 1 of Module 1. We're very glad you've joined us for this exploration of your camera. In this video, we're going to talk about how to hold your camera, and we're going to discuss DSLRs and mirrorless cameras. Now, before you tune out because you already know how to hold your camera, keep in mind that there is a proper way to do it. And to get sharp photos, we're going to discuss the best way to hold your camera, both horizontally and vertically. And we're going to do what's called a camera walk around. We're going to discuss the knobs, dials, all the features of your camera. Now keep in mind that your camera may not be a Canon or it may not be a Fuji, but that's all right because what we're going to discuss are common features to most DSLRs and most mirrorless cameras. So if you're ready to go, let's learn all about your camera. Okay, let's learn how to hold your camera. Now first we're going to deal with DSLR cameras, and then after we can discuss how to hold your mirrorless camera if you own one. Now the easy part is your right hand, because DSLRs usually have an indentation to make it really nice and easy to hold with your right hand. With your left hand, however, many people make the mistake of holding the camera body like so. We don't want to do this, however, because this will allow vertical camera shake if you are using a heavy lens. Instead, take your left hand and place it under the camera lens. This will give you a greater amount of stability, which in turn gives you a sharper picture. Another thing we can do to give ourselves a really good, stable platform is to put our elbows into our rib cage. Like so. This will provide a sort of tripod effect using your own body. Okay, we're ready to take our picture. Put our camera up to our eye. Snap the shot. Take a look at the image, and we have a good, sharp picture. Okay, now let's talk about how we use our camera or the vertical grip. It's pretty much the same thing. So we're going to simply turn our hands like so, and with your left hand we're going to place it under the lens the same as before. This time it's going to be our left elbow that pushes into our rib cage, and this again allows us to sort of act as a tripod. Place your camera up like so, take the picture, review, and again, we have a good, solid, stable, and sharp picture. Now what we're going to do is what we call a camera walk around. This means we're going to discuss all the things that are on the outside of a camera. Now keep in mind, this is the DSLR portion. We will get to the mirrorless portion later. Let's start with what's in front of the camera. Obviously, we have a lens. On the front of every camera body, there's a little button that if we push, it allows us to take the lens off. Now, a little hint. It's always best to hold the lens in this manner instead of this way. If we hold it this way, dust and other debris can fall into the glass, which we don't want. So let's put the lens back on. And by doing so, we are ready to shoot. Now the next button that we're going to deal with is called the AF/MF button. This means autofocus or manual focus. Now you may ask, why would I ever want manual focus if I can use autofocus and let the camera do the work by itself? Well, manual focus is very good when you're doing things like flower photography or close-up photography. Often the camera just can't focus the way that you would want to. That's when you're going to use manual focus, and that's this button here. When we're in manual focus mode, we switch this, we can actually change the focus ring on the lens, which is usually in the front, and this allows us to do fine-tuned manual focuses. The next item we're going to talk about is called image stabilization. Now this goes by many different names depending on the camera manufacturer. For example, Nikon might call it something different than Olympus, Canon calls it a stabilizer. Regardless of the name, image stabilization is very unique and it's a very interesting feature. What it is, it's sort of like a gyroscope inside the lens, where when you're holding the camera, if you shake a little bit, the gyroscope effect is going to correct the shake and give you a nice sharp picture. So, let's turn it on and let's turn it off. Now the question is, when do you use it on and when do you use it off? Well, if you're hand holding the camera, you should turn it on. If you have the camera on a tripod, you should turn it off. And the reason why you should turn it off when you're on a tripod is that it's not necessary to use. The tripod will keep everything still the way it should be. Now let's talk about the top of the camera. Now keep in mind that your camera model may look slightly different than this Canon. One thing that's common in all cameras is the on and off button. That may seem very obvious, but it's usually on the top of the camera. Also, a lot of DSLRs have their own built-in flash, and usually on the side at the top it's a little button that allows you to pop up the flash if you want the flash to fire. Now if you use an external flash, you can place it right here. Now not many people use external flashes, but if you have one, this is the place to use it, and it allows for a greater intensity of flash power. Also, this section here is called the LCD upper panel, and some cameras have it and some don't. If your camera doesn't have it, that's okay, because you'll be using the LCD screen on the back of your camera. Now with regards to this particular Canon, we have many different little buttons that are different from every camera manufacturer, so we won't go into that right now. However, one thing that a lot of cameras do have is a little dial at the very top. And this is a menu dial that will allow you to change aperture or shutter or whatever menu item that particular camera company has assigned to that dial. Now, the most important part of any camera, of course, is taking the picture. And usually the shutter release button is at the very top. And this allows you to take the picture or to take the video in some cases. Also, on the left we have a function dial that allows us to switch between manual, aperture priority, shutter priority, and program. And we will of course go through all of these things in great depth in a future video. Now we're going to go to the back of the camera. Now, again, different camera manufacturers have different buttons and dials, but one thing that's common, of course, is the eyepiece, and this is where we look through the camera to take our picture. However, with recent live view introduction, we're also able to take the picture or see through the camera in the back screen, which is very helpful. Another thing that's common to all DSLRs is some form of back dial. Now this dial looks different depending on what camera manufacturer you have, but essentially this allows you to scroll through the photos that you've just taken. Also, every DSLR has a play button, which allows you to play back the picture that you just took, and also a delete button, which will allow you to delete the picture if you don't like it. Okay, now let's look at the side and the bottom of the camera. So we'll just detach it from the tripod. At the bottom, we have what's called the tripod plate. And this plate, of course, attaches the camera to a tripod. On the side, on most DSLRs, if we open up this side portion, we have a place for a USB cable, a place for a mic, that's for doing video shooting, and also a place for a cable release, and we'll talk about that in a future video. On this side, we'll open this up, and we have a place for our memory card. And a memory card could either be what's called a CF or an SD, and again, we will talk about that in a future video. Now, let's discuss how to hold a mirrorless style camera. Now, the big difference in a mirrorless camera is that they're usually smaller in size. With our right hand, we're going to grip the camera the same way we would a DSLR. Now, with our left hand, it's a little bit harder to place your hand under the lens as we would a DSLR. So in this instance, if your mirrorless camera has a small lens, feel free with your left hand to grip the camera body. Now, we suggested with the DSLR that you don't do that, but because mirrorless cameras, as we said, are a little bit smaller, it's okay to grip your camera body with your left hand, like so. Now, with the horizontal grip, again, we want to press our elbows into our rib cage to get a good, solid, sort of upper body tripod. Okay, place your camera up, like so, and take the picture. With regards to vertical, it's pretty much the same thing. We're going to turn our camera like so. Our left hand can hold the camera body, and our left elbow is going to be pushed against our rib cage, the same way we discussed with the DSLR. Take the camera up to your eye and take the picture. Now let's do a mirrorless camera walk around. The obvious difference in a mirrorless compared to a DSLR is usually the size and the weight. There's far less moving parts inside a mirrorless camera, which allows it to be a more compact design. Also, you may have seen that the mirrorless cameras often have a retro look, which looks really good and is quite popular. Now, the basic functionality of a mirrorless camera is pretty much the same as a DSLR. You will have, of course, a shutter release. You will have a lens that comes off. You will have a rear screen. Everything's pretty much the same. Now, the inside is a little different, where often mirrorless cameras don't have a physical shutter that go up and down. Some of them do, like Fuji. Some of them don't, like Sony. So there's some really different fundamental interior situations that are different between a DSLR and a mirrorless. However, since we're talking about a full camera walk around of the exterior, not much is different except for the physical appearance. Thank you for watching video 1 from Module 1. I'm very glad that you joined me on this. In this video, we discussed the proper way to hold your camera, whether horizontal, vertical, whether a DSLR or a mirrorless style camera. Also, we did a camera walkthrough discussing the knobs, dials, buttons, and functions of a camera that are common to most makes and models, whether a DSLR or a mirrorless. I'm very glad you joined me on this video and looking forward to seeing you in the next one.